And thank you all for being part of our Renaissance grant, and we're excited about it. So I'm going to mute so we can get started.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking today. We're going to get started with this visual thinking strategies. And I'm very excited to learn more about this myself. I love this idea of using artwork to really, or different types of art and medium to help students think and have these rich discussions. And how do we as adults facilitate that discussion? So I'm going to let you be the expert on that, because I'm certainly not. And is there anything else we need to do prior, Brittany, before we get started?
I think we're good. I'm excited to talk to my art people this morning. I'm an art person myself. My background is art history, and I actually recently started working at KHS. For the past month, I started January 1st, technically January 3rd, and they asked me if I could do this PD, and I was like, well, what is this PD about? And they said visual thinking strategies. And I was like, that's perfect. I love that. So yeah, this is something I've been doing for quite a while in classrooms of my own. And yeah, it's been interesting to kind of learn the research behind it and the history behind it. Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun kind of getting this presentation together and learning more myself. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Get the Jackie, do you care if I think maybe I need to be a host or something? It says host disable participant screen sharing.
Did that pop up?
I think I've got it now. Okay, we don't need notes. Can everybody see that? Is that good for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, so now I'm the student programs coordinator at KHS, and basically, yeah, I do the K through 12 programming. So let's get into visuals. So just to kind of, I'm sure you all already know how important visuals are because, you know, right, you all are involved in the arts, but we are in the middle of a communication revolution. There have been three in sort of the timeline of humanity. The first being cuneiform tablets by the Sumerians, right, the kind of first wedge-shaped alphabet. And then we move on to the Gutenberg Revolution, which is the printing press. The Germans kind of get credit for this, but it was actually the Chinese that first started printing in 868 AD. But now we're in the middle of another revolution currently, and that's the digital revolution and digital images, which have kind of actually been around for a while. But of course, now since the internet has developed in the 90s, they've been distributed even more so. And it feels like each and every year, it's more, you know, we kind of get bombarded with images and video, and it kind of gets quicker, you know, faster paced each year. Our attention spans seem like they get shorter and shorter. But because of this digital revolution, it's going to become more and more important that we're going to be able to read images, and you want to read those images in depth. So how many of you all will consider yourself visual learners? You just raise your hand. I'll kind of scroll through the gallery. Okay, yeah, let's see. Wow, okay, like everybody, absolutely, yeah, quite a few. Maybe you've heard that, right? Some people are visual learners, some people aren't, but actually to some degree, we all are, right? So we take in 90% of our information through our eyes, and we make these kind of split-second judgments, decisions based on what we see. So it's one of, if not the most important sense when it comes to information. And who really cares about this when you Google it is the Department of Motor Vehicles. They will tell you that eyesight's very important when it comes to taking in information. This one site that I looked at, it was like, you really need to have, you know, ideally you're working with 20/20 vision. That's how important it is when you're out there on the road, as we know. So yeah, we're all visual learners. So like I mentioned, it's important that we know how to really fully take in all the information that is being presented to our eye. So let's get into visual thinking strategies specifically, because we all appreciate images, we all use images, we know how important they are. But to get more specific, how to get the most out of an image. So visual thinking strategies was developed by a museum educator named Philip Yenawine. And he was a museum educator at the Museum of Modern Art. Now, you all are my art people, so you know how big of a deal that is, right? And that's where the Starry Night lives. That's a big deal museum. So he's the museum educator there, and a donor came to him, gonna offer his program a lot of money. But that donor said, you need to prove to me that they're learning, that these programs actually are helping. And so they were like, all right, we'll prove it. And they did a study. And you know what they found out? They were not learning from their programs. So you can imagine how that would feel being the museum educator at MoMA. And I'm sure all the people that were working under him were really great people, and they were giving really great lessons. But you know, the students weren't really taking much away from it. And so then he said, of course, that's devastating for someone, like for their career. None of us would like to think of that happening in our classrooms. And so he decided that he was going to change that, figure out, well, what's the best way to help people learn from images? So he got together with an educator and psychologist. She had graduated from Harvard. These are big deal people. And named Abigail Housen. And she studied how we look at images and that development. And she came up with the theory of aesthetic development. And in her research, what happens, no matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is, there are 5 stages when you look at an image. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to just start to describe what you see: dog, cat, person, just the basics, right? And then the second is you're going to start to relate it to yourself, your culture, your morals, your social life. And then the third thing, naturally, like I said, everybody does this. You're going to bring in an art historical context, like the time period, what you know about the artist, that kind of thing. And then the fourth thing is then you begin to interpret. What could this mean? And then the fifth stage, it kind of sounds woo-woo, but maybe you all can relate to this, is the artwork kind of takes on a life of its own, or it seems like when you look at that image, it's like this old friend. It's very familiar to you, yet you keep coming back to it to look at it, kind of thing. And so that's sort of like the 5 stages. Her research involved showing people an image and then interviewing them. And it's just what people do. So you can understand, you can imagine, right? If you kind of just glance at an image, how you're not going to get very far in those stages, right? You're just going to describe and then move on. You're not going to fully learn from these images. You're not reading them fully and getting all of that information that the artwork can provide. So what VTS does is it helps you get through those stages. And so, you know, it develops visual literacy, right? You begin to read those artworks. So what VTS is it develops those skills through consistent exposure to images and then having an open discussion about them. It's very simple, it's very easy, but it makes a big difference. And so, yeah, VTS itself is a product of 30 plus years of research, and there's, you know, an entire website you can check out. You know, I watched a few sessions on YouTube. There's a lot of, you know, online resources where you can check this out. But after this presentation, you should be good. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to test our powers of observation. So now would be a good time for you all to get out a piece of paper and your 2 different colors. And you're just going to start with one color. It doesn't matter which. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at an image, a photograph, And I've chosen to look at that image for 15 seconds because that is the average amount of time that people spend looking at the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. 15 seconds, and then they're gone. I've looked up, I tried to find exactly how much time do people give an image? I would say it's not very long, right? Like a passing image, 3 seconds, maybe 2 seconds, and then it's gone. But even paintings, works of art, like, you know, things like that people know, or like masterpieces, they give, 7 to 15 seconds. One study found that people look at an image, look at the painting, for instance, for like 2 seconds. Then they read the text slide, the text panel, and then they glance back at the painting to kind of see that it fits, and then they're done. This is typically how it goes. But I chose 15 seconds because that's the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. So I'm going to show you this image, and I'll give you 15 seconds to look at it, and then we'll do an activity. Okay? All right. And starting now. So you just want to look at this image. All right, that's 15 seconds. That's how long people spend with the Mona Lisa. So now what I need you to do is draw what you saw. And I'll give you 2 minutes, and we'll just see how long it takes. If you have time, you can write out, you can make text observations if you'd like. A quick sketch. Definitely doesn't have to be detailed. All right, we'll take another 30 seconds or so. All right, and then we'll stop. So you all seem like you had quite a bit to draw, so that's good. That means you took in a lot. Do y'all care to hold it up to your camera? I'd like to see your drawings. And then we'll talk about it. Okay, kind of see some detail. All right, I'm trying to see if there's any common links here. All right. Nice, Melissa. Okay, I like your style. Great. Okay, I can see. It seems like a lot of people, the kind of priority was that shape of the, enclosure, right? Okay, if anybody just wants to unmute and talk about what they saw or what they drew, what kind of stood out from the image.
Is this the photograph we typically see more cropped in on the mother holding the baby?
You're like on number stage 5 just from the jump. Yes, spoiler alert. It is, yeah. But what did you yeah, what was the important thing for you to draw? What's the first thing you drew on your paper?
I'll say for me, I'm not an artsy person like Cassie. She's awesome, but I'm a drama person. I wish I could draw. It's one of the things I wish I could do. I can just sing and dance though. But so the first thing I drew actually wasn't the shape. It was the person like in the chair leaning. I tried to draw it, like the way she was like leaning on it, like just her. If I could draw, I would have drew her facial expression. That's what stuck out the most. And then I saw the woman and the baby, and that was kind of second priority.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's no wrong or right. It's just about how much can we really take in those 15 seconds, right? So anybody else?
Besides the shape of the parent, I just thought 2 adults, 2 children, 1 baby, tent, and then like void. Like
Right, exactly. So
mid-ground.
So that sounds like that first stage, right? Of just, if you don't have that much time, that's what you're going to do, right? Like you're not going to be able to like really soak it in. You're going to get people, children, tent, barren. You're just going to kind of do what you can when you don't have that much time. Now imagine, of course, you all, if I had given you the image, maybe you would have kind of sort of looked at it for a longer amount of time. But once again, that's the average amount that people look at a masterpiece. So it's like we're really not giving our images that much time to really understand what they're about. Anybody else? What they drew? What they just in a short amount of time?
I think.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead. Okay, so I had the same process as Cassandra. I kind of cataloged what I saw. So in terms of there are this many people, there is a tent that looks a certain way, like a particular shape, and then there are trees in the background, and there's a box like trunk in front, and the rocking chair that the one person is sitting in. And so I just went through and cataloged the shapes and images that I saw.
Right. Yeah, and that's not bad. That has to be the first thing you do, right? So did anybody write anything down?
I did. I wrote, I'm not an artist. I mean, stick figures are about the extent of my artwork, and then my children are like, Miss Debbie, is that supposed to be a dog? I mean, it's, my art limit is talented, but I kind of cataloged as well. I did, the first thing that caught my eye was the lady in the rocking chair and the look of utter despair on her face. And I wrote, what came to me was sort of a vagabond gypsy type lifestyle, homeless during Depression era. I just found the scene to be kind of just one of despair.
Right. Did you write that down, like Depression era, etc.?
I did. I went first from maybe Poor America, Dust Bowl, and then I thought Depression era. So I wrote those down. Um, I wrote the tarp over the truck, the despair in the mother's face. The kids to me looked a little malnourished. So
Well, that's you're doing a really good job. So you're into like an interpretation stage there when you're making kind of these and you're bringing that historical context. So yeah, you're kind of you're moving along in those stages. So that's really good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to VTS the image, and then we'll see what else we can learn about it and kind of expand on it. All right, so here's the image again. So you all, what is going on in this image?
You all feel free to unmute or type in the chat box, either one. But to me, my first thought is end of the road.
Yeah, I think of the Great Depression, like this isn't a full-blown Hooverville, but the same idea of a homemade space to live. And then I can't remember the full historical context of this photograph, but I also think about people being on their way to the orphan trains, or during the Great Depression time, or even before, when sometimes the families would just be moving their kids out to an area, or to get them to those areas where they could be put on orphan trains. But I don't think that's really the context of this photo, but it makes me think of that.
So Cassandra, what makes you say that? We've heard Great Depression. There's something in this photograph that has to make you think of that time period, 1930s. So what, like visually, says Great Depression?
The style of the rocking chair, the clothing style, the trunk, that they had, it's like canvas, the hairstyle, the mother's hairstyle, you know, and then I just think like dusty out west, which this is not the Dust Bowl time, but yeah, the stylings of the furniture, the styling of the clothing, the hairstyles puts me in that era. Of course, the black and white, and then just seeing that tarp is canvas.
Yeah, so that's taking in a lot, right? Like that's really kind of putting it all together. Is there anything else that you all can find?
We had several in the chat. One said, I think this is a Dorothea Lange picture. So Dust Bowl era. Debbie, I think you're, okay, there you go. Also visual sadness, the despair, older than actual age. Bleak.
Facial expressions.
Yes.
Right. So you all are bringing in that historical context. You just sort of, right, Dorothea Lange, because that's an iconic, and you're probably thinking of that iconic photograph of the migrant mother, and you're recognizing her here. And those powers of observation to place this image in 1930s Great Depression, and picking up on those expressions. It's not a happy image. Something has gone wrong here, based on both their surroundings and expression once again. Yeah, so bringing it all together. So we have time period. It's not great. Is there anything like specifically what is going on here? Like what, is this, can you all make any type of, just based on visually, like what is actually, going on? Like, do they live here? What is their life like?
Heather, you had a great comment in the chat box. Do you want to unmute or you want me to read that?
No, I don't care to unmute. So I was on my phone for this meeting, and I didn't get to see the image to draw it until right at the end. And so looking at it closer, it struck me so strongly to see desperation and lack of hope in the eyes of the adults, that they know what the fate is, but that the children still have some hope in their eyes and are smiling, that they don't know exactly, how bad things are. But that makes me feel a little hopeful in seeing it too, because I feel like children are constantly carrying that inspiration of hope, and that they don't give up as easily. But it just, and that's why I'm sorry if my video, I was going, like really looking close at it. But when I saw, and it's just so slight, they're just barely smiling. Their eyes are just a little bit brighter than the adults, but that just kind of made me go, oh man, they don't know, they're not aware.
Yeah, Heather brings up a good point. So she's adding in that it's not all despair here, or the prevailing feeling when you first look at the image is of like you mentioned, Jackie, I think, end of the road, this is not good. But then the children have these smiles. So do you think that they just are, what else is going on in this image sort of that's making them, smile or feel this way? Like what else is going on in this image, if you imagine sort of behind the scenes?
I love the way you're phrasing that, Brittany, because some folks in the chat box have said, I've tried to look at this through a child's eyes who may be looking at this picture for the first time and not understand the historical context and all the number of questions they would have. And what a great historical teaching moment. Anyone like to speak to that? And Susan said, my mind's questions were, how long have they been there? How have they used everything useful in their suitcase? Are there any males in the picture? And I don't know if she means literally the picture or in the picture.
Right. Yeah, there's more questions than answers, and that's okay, right? Because what we're trying to do is inquiry, right? And just starting that questioning and interpreting. We'll never have all the answers. We'll never know exactly what's going on, but yeah, it's kind of that building on it. But yeah, but back to what I mentioned, right? Like, so when you look at this image, it's like, what's going on? If you really think about it, they are posing in some way, right? Like they are like looking at a camera, and Dorothea Lange is behind that camera. And so that changes things a little bit in terms of this is not a candid photo. You think of Migrant Mother, that's a little bit more candid, but the mother, Florence Thompson, she was 32 years old, had 7 children. She's aware that Dorothea Lange is there, and the kids are too. So how does that change when you factor that in? What's going on? Or how does that change how you view it?
I think it's interesting because the contrast in outlooks or perspectives, the different subjects in the picture, how the kids are smiling. Maybe they think this is a big camping trip, it's fun, exciting for them. It just shows the contrast, I'm thinking about other artworks that have big contrast, and it's just kind of like it's just interesting.
So you all know how kids are, right? You know how kids are. Especially if you had children in the 1930s. When you look at this image, right, what's going on? What are they smiling about? Like, what could they be smiling about? A lot of things, right? but can't you imagine that they're like, who's this lady with the camera? And for all of them, it would be a big day where they are, right? Like, what do you mean you want to take my picture, kind of thing. So that's kind of part of it too. What's going on is this family who, aren't doing so well, and you can tell that by where they live and their condition, but yet smiling and have this idea of hope. And then if you do bring in that historical context, like Cassandra was doing, you might know that Dorothea Lange sent these pictures to the government, and then the government was able to help the family and provided for them. And they were like, they saw these images, of migrant mother and her family, and they were like, we have to help these people. So the photograph itself, it did, like, their expressions of smiling and hoping, it really, that is really big picture what's going on with the image, if that makes sense. And for students in your class, you wouldn't have to go into that much depth. It would just be like, you would be making the points about how hard it was for families during the Great Depression. This was for the Dust Bowl time period. Anything else you can tell just from, just anything you see in the image before we move on?
They're not all wearing clothing appropriate to their gender or age because they have what's available to them for the time period.
And it dawned on me that the lady in the chair is not wearing shoes. It just hit me a few seconds ago.
Yeah, and I have never even noticed that. And that's one of those things where you look at the images again and again, you'll see something different every time, more and more and more.
Some people put in the chat box questions about exploitation. You sort of addressed that, Brittany, about her purpose, and they did too in the chat box. But I think as a language arts teacher or someone that wanted to explore a little deeper about the power of narrative or persuasion, that could also be a really good conversation as well.
Right. I think one of the key things visually about this image are those suitcases, right? Because that really gives you the impression, and just how temporary this housing is. I've used that migrant mother, that's how she's known. And that's because they're migrating, they're moving from place to place. These are migrant farmers, and they are kind of chasing across the country, trying to make just trying to survive, but they have to kind of constantly move. And those suitcases really, I think, demonstrate that. So what I'll have you all do just briefly is add in the things that you didn't have in your original drawing. So of course, like, I would assume, right, when you take a minute to really look at it and talk it out and discuss it, there's a lot more to learn than when you just kind of like a snapshot of 15 seconds. And that's just to kind of elaborate on, how important taking the time, discussing it, trying to get through those, at least 4 stages, trying to get to the point where you actually are interested, or you kind of had that time to interpret an image. And even if I went to a blank screen, you could probably just still draw more and more and more, because you've spent more time with it and you've really gotten to know the image, right? All right, you all can continue doing that. I know I like to draw and doodle in class. So let's learn more specifically about VTS so that you all can use this in your classrooms. All right, so how does VTS benefit students? So as you all saw, it's much more learner driven. In my art history classes, I could put up an image, and what I try to do is have them tell me, because of course I could just rattle off and tell them all the facts. Well, this is Migrant Mother, the series, and this, but students don't really learn as well that way, like more of a lecture style. It's better that it's learner driven, and it's also process focused. With VTS, you can kind of tell them the answer at the end, but that's not even what matters. It's not about right answer or wrong answer. With VTS, there are no wrong answers. Someone could have said, this family's in a circus and traveling, or this family, maybe you got the time period wrong, or this or that. And that's not really what matters, because it's about questioning and inquiry. And typically, you all, if you have a group of 25, they will typically get closer and closer and closer to the right answer. You just have to give them time and to talk it out. And your job is just to be, if all goes well, you're just a moderator. So the learning and discussion is the answer. And it's going to increase critical thinking, visual literacy, communication, collaboration. I've read where this really helps people in the medical field as well as the arts in general. Because you want your doctor to observe very closely, right? And it helps business people. So it's not just art, it's not just history, it really builds a lot of soft skills. So how it factors into our state standards is it's really great for inquiry, because when you ask a student what is going on in this image, it begins their questioning and their investigating. And then usually, students will say certain things, and it's like, what do you see makes you say that? So then students will then be kind of required to give evidence. What do you see in this image that makes you say that? Well, because she's not wearing shoes, because the enclosure is made out of canvas, because of the despair on their face. So you want to have your students providing evidence for what they're observing. And then, of course, in this discussion, they're also communicating out loud their conclusions. So that's the process. And your images can be about civics, geography, economics, history, or what have you. And you can kind of curtail this. I know my art standards pretty well, so you can obviously, this is specifically social studies, but you can curtail this for your needs. So the structure of VTS, your discussions are going to last from 12 to 20 minutes. 10 minutes is okay, but you'd be surprised. Like whenever I showed you all the image, I was like, I wasn't thinking it would last as long as it did, right? I'm like, we'll just breeze through this and go on. But yeah, you'd be surprised how long it can last just by looking at an image and talking about it. Your images, and we'll get into this and I'll give you some examples. You want an image that does give a narrative, but is also ambiguous enough to allow discussion. So some of you all already had that context. You knew about Migrant Mother. So when you think about your class and showing them images, you don't want to show them an image they've seen a million times or an image that is a little bit too obvious. You do want a story, but it shouldn't be too obvious. You do want to give them that discussion. So as a facilitator or moderator, you can ask open-ended questions which present a challenge but are answerable. And it takes practice and kind of figuring that moderator role out, because as teachers, right, we just kind of were like, here's the answer. And then as that discussion progresses, the questions and answers should become more specific. Once again, it can take a little bit of practice to kind of get into that flow. And then as you go, it's great to restate their comments, just to show participants that they are heard and make sure everyone feels capable of participating. So it's not like a right or wrong. Ideally, you try to link different students' answers, like, you know, Carmen said this about it, and that's sort of what, you know, Jenny was saying over here. So just kind of, you know, practicing that moderator role. So the language itself, this is sort of the script that you would use for VTS. This is what you would say to your students. And it's a very specific script. So you'd want to kind of try to commit this to memory, or even like kind of even have a printout of it as a script. So the first thing you'll say is take a moment to study the image and give them a little bit of time. And the first question you ask is, what's going on in this picture? For me as an art teacher, my instinct is to say, what do you see? What do you see? But that's not great. That's not as good as what's going on in this picture. If you look down below on this slide, you'll see that a child psychologist helped researchers come up with the language that they should use in VTS to get kind of the greatest impact, because words matter. So what do you see? They'll start to list, right? They'll be like cat, dog, woman, like woman, chair, tent, and that's great, but that's not really going in as much depth as we want to really learn from the image. So what's going on? What's happening? That's more important, right, than what they see. So what's going on in this image? And then what do you see that makes you say that? So that brings it back to, what did you see, right? That's the evidence. What do you see that makes you say that? Like these people, it's the end of the road, they're sad, they're in despair. What do you see that makes you say that, right? And then after sort of talking about that, then it's what more can you find that sort of redirects them back to the image and looking for things. Sometimes, as you all know, students, they get, you know, in that stage that we talked about, those stages, they kind of will get off on their own story. Well, like my dad and I, when we went camping, you know, and you know, kind of rein that in however you will, but that's a really great way of, what more can you find, or what do you see? It kind of directs it back to the image. So these are specific questions. You don't want to kind of exchange them. Make sure that the sort of meaning is kept. It's kind of a specific script. So that's what the students will get. The moderator's role. So the first half of this is the same, but you know, a really good VTS facilitator, and like I said, it takes practice, but you would paraphrase responses. So you almost like would repeat what they say and kind of change the words around a little bit, because it makes the student feel heard. Even if the answer is completely wrong, or it's like, you know, that's fine, because it's not about that. And then you want to maintain a neutral tone. Once again, there is no right or wrong. Okay, you know, it's like, Jimmy thinks it's a circus because this, and this, and this. And then, you know, so it's not like good or bad or right or wrong. And then you want to try to link responses between students, like, oh, this person agrees with this person, or this person has a little bit of a different take on it than this person, or you can build, you know, like this student mentioned this, and then this student is also mentioning this, so you're both noticing this kind of thing. And then at the very, very end, you can tell them, you don't have to, right? Because there's no right or wrong, but I think we all want to know, like, but what is it really? So you can let them know what the image really is about. Do you all have any questions about kind of the process? Like the questions or your role as a facilitator? So basically, right, you would show them the image and then ask them, take a moment, what's going on in this image? And as they start to say answers, what do you see that makes you say that? And then paraphrasing their answers, sort of trying to link your class's answers together, while remaining that neutral tone. So you're just kind of you're just kind of facilitating that discussion. And if given enough time, and they should kind of begin to interpret that image and just learn more from it.
Shalita made a comment in the chat about, we were talking about no right answers kind of thing. And she said that what she does is to say the right answer is to give an answer. And a lot of people said they really like that. I felt that way a lot with poetry. You're trying to help them interpret and whatnot. And Brittany, I thought you had a good point too about asking those questions helps them really search out for the evidence of what they're trying to explain.
Right. Yeah, exactly. 'Cause it's all about that discussion. And as I mentioned, interestingly, people do, when you get 20, 25 people in a group, they do tend to, when they're speaking out loud, they may not understand 100% of the context. A group of fourth graders might not say Dorothea Lange, migrant mother, but they will understand, a lot of that context just from talking about it. So you'd be surprised how close they get. So let's talk about a good image, right? So as I kind of mentioned earlier, you do want an image that tells a story. And like there's something going on, there's a lot to pick from, a lot to discuss about. But you don't want to do something too obvious, right? I think VTS is really great when you're introducing a topic. It's a really good, like, first things first, and then kind of getting into the subject. It's also really good for emotional impact, maybe even more so than text would be, because you're seeing it, right? Kind of bringing the people to life in the Great Depression era before then reading a text or learning about it. And then you also want to have that right amount of ambiguity, mystery. If you show somebody an image they've seen a million times or it's too obvious, then it's not going to promote discussion. You want to allow for all participants to be able to discuss, so you don't want to shut somebody out. And then this last one, does an image set tell a bigger story? So don't feel limited to just one image. So for instance, this is an example of an image set, right? So this is, if you just showed the first image, imagine the other three aren't there. That does tell a little bit different story than if you add the second one and the third one and the fourth one, which is more so a contemporary image that they might recognize. So, really, if you just showed any one of these images, I mean, it's fine, but you can see how an image set would be even more impactful. And then, like we talked about with Migrant Mother, right? So I showed you all the one we could VTS the Migrant Mother, the image, which is one of the most famous photographs in the world, maybe second most famous photograph ever taken. Most people recognize it, like have seen it before. But one is a little bit too familiar for you all, maybe. And also not as much information as the one I did show you. I wanted to give you all one that did have their enclosure and the suitcases and the rocking chair and the dust and the barren landscape. I wanted to give you as much information as possible, but you all could, right, give them all of these, or start with one and then add the others, because it doesn't hurt to really give that emotional impact of that mother and her children, the weight on her shoulders. So so feel free to build upon your images and use more than one. Works of art are also really great. Of course, we have photographs, historical documentation. But before, right, late 1800s, we didn't have photography. And so your paintings, your artworks, not just from the past, but even graphic design, you could use that, you know, illustrations. So feel free to use artworks, 2D from the past. Like I've got a Picasso example here. Abstract is fine. So yeah, bring in your artworks. You could also do 3-dimensional sculptures. You know, this is a vase from ancient Greece, but it has that imagery. It has that story on it. The Capitoline Wolf, the founding of Rome. I'm sure you get a lot of funny answers if you VTS that one. I brought my mom back a little statuette from Rome, and she was like, I don't know what they're doing in Italy because it seems so odd, you know? And then that's a relief sculpture from the Capitol building in DC. So even buildings, you can use that, right? So anything with a story that is, that, you know, anything with the narrative, the story that is just ambiguous enough. What you don't want to do, right, is something like this. Still life doesn't really tell you too much. Jackson Pollock doesn't really have a narrative to it. So, you know, something once again with a story that's not too obvious. You can build on that image, especially a photograph, right? You can do a series of images. Does anybody have any questions about what's good, what's bad?
Do you think Norman Rockwell would be too obvious? His works for younger students, like 11, 12, would it be like his stuff too on the nose? Like,
Right. Well, no, I don't think so. What you could do is maybe try it, and then see if they're kind of, you know, dismissive or if it's just too easy for them, if it doesn't promote. You could always try it, right? You know, you never really know until you try. And in some images, you'll kind of learn like, oh, you'll kind of get like people really like this one, or people like talking about this one. This one makes an impact on students and this one not as much. So, you know, you could always try it. But no, I don't think there's as long as there's like it depends on what would you kind of use it for, you think?
well, like what you're saying, like I thought of a connection to like claim evidence reasoning. And I have kiddos interpret narrative art. And I've used, so that with Norman Rockwell, I know what I was saying was like, is it too, where you're too obvious or too easy? Because you do kind of see all the pieces there, but some of them are more detailed. Like I think of the Norman Rockwell with the boy soldier coming home, and you see like the family on the porch, but then there's like a teenage girl around the side of the house kind of peeking around. Maybe that's his girlfriend, or maybe that's a neighbor that had a crush and he's been gone and now he's back. And then the two parents, I think, have a different look on their face.
You're describing plenty. No, so you know, there's a lot. And just because the pieces are there, you think of like a photograph, doesn't mean that it would be too obvious, because they've got to really take in all of that. If they just kind of did a snapshot or something, then they wouldn't gain all that information. So yeah, I don't think just because something is very like representational or you know, Norman Rockwell, you could say a little cheesy or whatever, that doesn't mean it would be bad for a BTS image. But you know, you could look at it and say, is this a little bit too obvious? You know, maybe go something, if you think it might be, go something else, you know. But it's fun. You could try it once and then see. All right.
I'd
So
also encourage you to look in the chat box as we're going. Hopefully you've got that open. People are putting in a lot of great ideas too of other things that they do in their classroom. Thank you all for sharing that.
wow. Yeah, somebody's gonna we'll have to save this and I'll read this. Yeah, that's a good thought. I like that, Josh. Like, hey, if it's obvious in the beginning, that first, yeah. Megadeth album, I like that. I did a Taylor Swift album once in class. It's like, let's talk about snake imagery. So where you all can find some images. All right, so we have at KHS a digital collection. We've digitized a lot of stuff, and I will, we have a starter kit, a PowerPoint that has a starter kit of different images, especially if you're doing anything about Kentucky history, that kind of thing, that I'll make sure you all have. And then you think of Library of Congress, you know, a lot of great databases for images. So we can give you some. We also have a Pinterest page. So I can provide you all the links. I can send them, and then they can be forwarded to you all to look at. So let's talk about assessment, right? We're teachers. We've got to assess it. We've got to know, is this helping, right? So an assessment that we did, because we did want to make sure that VTS was helping. We don't want to just, right? So we did a little bit of research. And so this is what an assessment could look like. The assessment that we did, basically putting that image right on a piece of paper and then asking those same 3 questions. So you know, it's nice to do a discussion, but in an assessment format, you could just ask them to write it out, a written assessment. And so, yeah, same 3 questions we were asking before, giving them 15, 20 minutes to write that out. And I'll show you all the rubric. Let me see if I can, what happens if I do this? That's better. All right, so this is the rubric that was used. And you can see as this pops up, how the rubric is geared towards those inquiry standards. Right, so you have to offer your observations. Number 1, so, and there's an example. And then you want to go even further. Ideally, they're offering detailed observations. And then they have to provide that evidence, right? So right there on the rubric, because that's the key word, because their faces look serious, because that's when you know that they're using their evidence. And then communicating claims, that's when they're talking about it, right? Or writing about it. That's when they're like, maybe, a lot of times it's like maybe, or maybe they're doing this, or they're kind of getting specific, not just describing or even saying because, but kind of a bigger picture, right? It's like, well, I see this, then maybe this is going on because, you know, like they're giving, they're inferring meaning out of the image, not just describing, but for example, maybe there's a fight going on. Maybe someone is teaching a class, maybe this, maybe that. They're kind of making their own interpretation. Right there, observations or interpretations clearly. And then this last one, this is kind of like, you know, gold star. It's kind of, this is the hardest one to get to. It's impressive if they start to make their own interpretations, and but if your students start to ask questions like, well, I wonder why, like even in their written assessment, I wonder why, or start to question, probe further, then that's even better. And notice, right, that these steps kind of match those 5 stages of aesthetic development developed by Hausen. So this is an example. So this is, I'm going to show you the same student twice, different time periods. So this is the written assessment, this is the image, and initially the student, 3rd grade, October 2013, as you can see, this is what they wrote, right? People, wood for the floors, lamps that are hanging, windows, walls, clock. So what they're doing, right, is they're just describing, they're writing out like kind of just, that's that first stage, right? Describing the one word. Okay, that's kind of like a what do you see, like just one word. But we want to go further, right? Because we have to interpret and get meaning from these images. Because images, right, like you think of an artwork, it has a message, idea, or feeling behind it. And you just have to be able to read it, right? We read text all the time, but images are also telling us something. And we just, a lot of us don't have that, you know, that kind of visual literacy language. So then later, right, this is May 2014. That's October to May. Look at how much the student wrote. And same image, same written assessment. And it says right here at the beginning, like there's an important meeting going on. Just from the jump, we're interpreting immediately. Because, right, providing that evidence, every person is in this room, like maybe discussing stuff to share at the meeting. So there's an important meeting because everybody's in the room discussing stuff. So making that observation and providing evidence based on what they see. It also says just a men thing. I don't see any girls there. And so observing, making that observation. And then the student, let me move my chat box so I can read it. Well, it says at some point, right? It mentions that that they're moving stock out of a building and they're basically inventorying, goes on to say, and that is absolutely correct. That's exactly actually what they're doing. Like ding, 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 that's the right answer. So at the beginning, the student in October was just describing, but then they had a whole year of practicing VTS and looking at images and discussing it and kind of getting into that habit of providing evidence and interpretations and that kind of thing. So as I mentioned, one of my colleagues did this research, went into different schools and different classes and was trying to figure out, like, does VTS help, like, across different disciplines? It's not just an art thing, it's not just a history thing, it's across disciplines. It's like, could just showing images and talking about them actually benefit the students? And I've read the report. It's kind of a lengthy, it's research, it's pretty in-depth. But this is a nice chart that kind of shows you. And as you can see, right, so first two bars, right, that's third grade. And then it's as they moved on to fourth grade and fifth grade, and then it's another group and another group and another group. So for 3 different years, they tracked the students' progress. And so you see that it improved every single time from year to year, right? So it's pre and post, pre and post, pre and post. Sometimes it improved dramatically. And that's based on that rubric that I showed you all, right? So they gave them assessment, they used that rubric, graded them, and they gave them the same assessment, the same rubric, and graded them again. And they scored much higher. And it's one of those things I think that you can tell just by going through the process that it could only, help students, right? So other ways that you could use VTS in the classroom, don't just think it's even just strictly narrative stuff. You can even VTS or analyze a map. This is a map of Frankfurt, and then students can create their own map. So you think of younger students who are learning about community and that kind of thing. So you can kind of combine. You can do the VTS, visual literacy, then you can learn specifically about history, and then you can do a project. So what KHS does when it's not, pandemic COVID life, we go into different schools and we do programming. And this is an example of one of the programs that we would do. So we would show them this image, we would VTS it, talk about it. Then we would talk about specific inventors in Kentucky, the specific time period, and then they would create their own inventions. So you can kind of, build on it. Here's another example of learning about frontier life, pioneer clashes with the original Kentuckians, and using artifacts, learning about pottery, and then creating pottery of their own. So, you can kind of build on it. Writing a bill, but you could start with the image, start with just talking about an image and building upon it. You can introduce text this way. And you can also, this is an idea my colleague had, where you could stage a reveal. You can actually even kind of divide a picture up into parts and kind of have them try to figure out the big picture. So yeah, so this seems like, you know, you VTS this part, hold on. And then you add in this part, and then and then a final reveal. So you're making kind of assumptions, learning about things, VTSing it. And like you might at first think this is a party or a social gathering. Oh, that's a big house, etc. And then it's actually a pretty dark image of a public hanging. So you could even kind of do, you know, a slow reveal. The New York Times every week basically does VTS, where they show an image and they have people guess what it's about, what its context is. And then at the end of the week, they reveal what it actually is. And this is about, it's a drive-in. People are at a drive-in. So, and it's just fun for everybody, adults, right? I mean, people love this in the New York Times. It's on their website. So it could be, you know, don't think of it as just a past thing. Definitely feel free to show them contemporary images. You can get interactive with VTS. This is always fun. Students love this. So, you know, you want to discuss the image and then you can act it out. If you have a fun group. And then, so that's, you know, Tableau. And then if you even want to go further, if your students aren't so shy, they can provide dialogue. They can almost act it out. I had some theater people, right? Great. So they could pretend like they are the people in the image. So, you know, people in this particular image with the raising the flag at Iwo Jima, they might say, I'm scared, or I love my country, or what have you. So really putting themselves in the place of the people in the image. So you can build on it and get creative. So the image itself, they can act it out. You know, my students, and if I take my students to an art museum, that's what they naturally do. They recreate it. They want to take a picture. So let them act it out, and then really become the people in the image, or the figures in the image. So this is a program that I was mentioning that we do in schools. A lot of our programming at KHS does revolve around visual thinking strategies. So we've just kind of seen that it really helps. So whatever program we do, we typically do start with analyzing a image of it first. And I'm just going to give you some examples of just images that I thought of, both from our collection, like this one, and just art history, just to kind of give you some ideas. And then I think we're going to break out and have you all try moderating and doing your own VTS. So here's one. You know, you think of Frontier Life. It's from our collection. Signing the Constitution. You think of a history class, something like that. Washington crossing the Delaware, if that's not too obvious, right? This is a guerrilla raid, Civil War. Ancient Egypt, Book of the Dead, learning that process. The Afterlife. This is from the 1937 flood in Louisville. And then, yeah, feel free to get abstract with it. The fight for disability rights in the 70s, and then a more contemporary image. So definitely feel free to bring in images from today. Anybody have any questions about VTS?
And I'm just going to reiterate, check out the chat box, folks. People are just left and right ideas. They're very excited about what we're doing and what you're talking about, Brittany. So great. So what questions do you have?
Taylor Swift fan, I see you. I see you, Rachel. Reputation Era, that album cover. So yeah, and feel free, you know, the drawing activity that I did with you all, that's something that I kind of came up with. I was like, I would really like to see, because most people, right, they go with a written assessment, but I'm a visual person, right? I'm an art person. So I'm like, draw it out. And I think it's fun. It's funner, you know? So, and it'd be interesting to see those kind of two different colors and what you added, more detail and that kind of thing. So feel free, yeah, to come up with your own activities. Just try to make sure that they kind of stay in line or stay true to the goals of VTS, which is just them interpreting those images further and learning from them.
Is there a place online that we can access your resources or like the student response kind of prompt?
Yeah. I will go ahead and maybe when I get back to the office on Monday, I can give you all a folder for that. But yeah, so we have a presentation of images from our collection you can use, and we have helpful hints about how to use our digital collection, and we have helpful hints about using the Library of Congress's collection. And you know, the assessment, I can give you an example, but it's really just those 3 questions. It's just the image and those 3 questions, giving them 15, 20 minutes and then writing it out. But yeah, I can give you that plus the rubric would be handy.
And Brittany, if you want to email that to me, I can shoot that out to them as well. And that'll be great.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad you all are excited. Yeah, this chat. I mean, you all are my people. Let's hang out. It's network.
I teach elementary music right now, but for 13 years I taught high school, and I was teaching the arts humanities class. So I was teaching like visual art, kind of went through the time periods. And Khan Academy was a really neat resource, and they kind of have little videos where they talk about the artworks. And
I use that. Yeah, we use that in my classes. It's like Smart History, Khan Academy. Let's go.
There's a YouTube channel called Great Art Explained, where they take a masterpiece and talk through it for about like most of the videos are like 10 to 12 minutes. Some of them will go to like 15 minutes. It's called Great Art Explained. So maybe that would be something you could do after you've gone through this process with them. And then, because that one has all the context from the artist and their intention and why they did everything they did. That could be cool after you've worked through this process with the faintness piece.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah. And then just, you know, it's important to kind of reiterate to them, like, even if there is like a specific kind of, you know, right and wrong and what the artwork's about, that what they're doing, right, there is no right or wrong, kind of staying neutral. So if you do that, it's like, oh, you know, just, I guess, making that clear, like, you weren't wrong because you said this or that, or, you know, maybe give it some time, do it the next day or something. All right, so Wendy, how do we, I can give you all, I think I have the link here to those VTS images that I included. If you all need that for the breakout rooms, I'm not sure how that works.
Whatever is easiest for you, we can do that. If that's the easiest way for us to do that, and we can drop it in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, just to give everybody
Want 4 breakout rooms?
just to give everybody like a chance to, we've got about 45 minutes left. So you know, just a little bit more you know, practicing and like kind of seeing how it's done. And yeah, after today, probably ready to do it in the classroom.
Yeah.
So here's a link. This is going to send you to my like Google Drive, and it has those, it's got about 10 images that they can use, they can download and use that. And once again, right, if you all are familiar with Guernica and everything about it, then you wouldn't want to use Guernica, right? So try to pick those images that it's like, I've never seen this before. And yeah, you could practice. And remember, there's no right or wrong.
Okay, you want me to just go ahead and open all those rooms?
Yeah, that'd be great. I've actually never.
It should indicate that you can join. Now, Wendy, getting all of those links in those rooms,
Jackie, what you can do is you can copy that and then you can send out a broadcast to all.
Thank you. There we go.
You're very welcome. That way they have it again once they get in their breakout room.
Got it. Broadcast done. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Been a while since I've done that.
And then just like maybe before time ends, you will, let them know like how much time, we have remaining for them to work in the groups.
Are we gonna go till 12 or do you want me to bring them back before?
I think maybe bring them back a little
Okay.
before, and then just remind them that our one session evaluation will be at the end of our afternoon session. So we won't have I guess we're kind of conditioned now to having that after every session, but since this is a whole day session, it'll just be the one session evaluation.
Yeah. And I see there's some people still on there like Deb and Tanya.
So they may not, if they didn't hit that invite, you may actually have to add them again.
Okay. So you should get something to say, go ahead and
That
go
says-
to the room.
Right.
There she is. Oh, she went. Okay.
Yeah.
And how much time for lunch?
We'll go from 12 to 1 for lunch and then come back at 1. And then you can go ahead and pause the recording for this part.
Right now.
Yeah. And if you don't, you'll just pause it or, hit pause because otherwise it.
No, this was just a really great experience and had a lot of fun with you all for sure. And I'm glad you all are excited and just start to use those. You can use those images in your classrooms. It's a pretty simple process. Once you kind of get that script down and kind of practice, then yeah. And by the way, I know that your students will really like it too.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So we are going to go to lunch in just a second, and we'll go to lunch from noon to 1. And Dr. Evans, correct me if any of this is off here, or if there's anything else you'd like to add. But
say like yellow is.
Well, Jackie, go ahead. Wendy's going to close there too. So, and I'm jumping off this other thing. So yeah, go right ahead, Jackie.
I was just going to say, we're going to go to lunch from 12 to 1, correct?
Yes.
And so we'll just come back to the other link that you have for your afternoon session. And at the end of the day, I'll put the session evaluation in the chat box. Remember, you really need to fill that out. That's part of the ending piece. And it's also how you get paid. So that's a really important part of that as well. And the evaluation link, again, is going to be for both sessions all together. So just kind of bear in mind comments that you want to make, will be about both of them. Is there anything else before we do go? Anything I might need to remind you?
Brittany, can you please tell us what Guernica is? Because all I can think of is the TikTok sound. I like it, Picasso. If anybody else watches TikTok, you know what I'm talking about.
You do teach high school, don't you?
I know.
So yeah, Guernica is by Picasso, and it's this actual little town in Spain. And this is pre-World War II, 1937. And, Hitler had a lot of machinery, planes, bombs that he wanted to test. And this is during the Spanish Civil War too. So fascists versus, within Spain, they were clashing. And so Hitler got with General Francisco Franco, who took over at the time. And he said, I have some things to test, right? And General Francisco Franco said, why don't you use my little town of Guernica? And so they bombed this innocent civilians, and this happened in real life. And this was painted by Picasso. It's a huge painting. It was painted right 6 weeks after the event, and it was put on display for the World's Fair so that nobody would ever forget what happened at Guernica. And it really highlights the Spanish Civil War. And it's done in black and white to look like a newspaper because it's a historical event. And you all maybe picked up on a little bit of that text. And of course, the whole painting is abstract and shattered because that's what happened to Guernica.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah. I was itching. I was like, I'll send you a recording of my class. Like, you have to know.
It's funny when Brittany and I were talking, she was like, I love the arts. I'm so excited. So it's always great to bring in people that have this love of the arts to share with you all. So we were super excited when Brittany and I were talking and connecting. So she was like, these are my people. So we may bring Brittany back to share some more little tidbits with you all because she does have that love. So I hope that you all enjoyed this. I will tell you, I've been hopping in on this other session. You all are going to love this afternoon as well on teacher leadership and kind of cultivating that and growing that in you as well. So make sure you grab a great lunch. Make sure you do go to the restroom before the session starts because Deb is hilarious. You all will be in stitches and laughing. So it's going to be a great afternoon of learning as well.
Yeah, have a good one.
Thanks so much, Brittany.
See you all back at 1.